Hey guys, welcome to the Massive Iron Channel. I'm Steve Shaw. In this video, we're going to talk to one of the top natural pros, Frank Gigante. Before we get into this topic, if you have any questions or comments, drop them down below. If you need coaching, it's what I do for a living. I would love to help. Please check out the link below. All right, so there's a lot of talk about natural bodybuilding, natural lifting in the YouTube world. And it's a pleasure today to actually pull on a natural pro, Frank. Frank is 51 years old and just competed at one of the top competitions for naturals in the United States, the Yorton Cup. Frank, if you don't mind, if you could introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your background, and tell us a little bit about the Yorton Cup and what it means to natural bodybuilding.
Sure thing. Thank you for having me. It's truly an honor to be here and then be on with you. Yep, my name is Frank Gigante. I have been bodybuilding for close to 30 plus years now. Started when I was around 14. Got bit by the bodybuilding competing bug a few years after that. And it's been a lifestyle of training and learning and nutrition. The competing is my own extreme passion that I'll take, to the end when I need to or want to. But truly, the goal is hard training, learning nutrition, and it's a lifestyle 24/7, 365. So, yep, I did just compete a few weeks ago in the OCB Yorton Cup, which is their premier pro championship event. There were in total, I think, over 234 pro competitors, both male and female, over the weekend. I competed in the open male or men's bodybuilding. There were 26 pro competitors in that division alone. It's truly an event, top tier event in the natural world of bodybuilding. It's an honor to compete there and to qualify. I qualified earlier this year by winning my class at the OCB Presidential and placing third in the overall there. And it means a lot because it is, some of the best of natural athletes. We are drug tested, and then the top three in each division are urine tested. It gets sent to a lab. We get the results back. I actually have the lab report from the OCB Presidential, just came in a few weeks back. And it's just meaningful to me personally because I know I'm natural and I've been a lifetime natural lifter, and um, not that I expect the results to come back any different, but there's just a little validation there of knowing this is the lifestyle I choose and I am taking it to my best extreme that I can.
One of the reasons why I wanted to have you on is because in my world, in the YouTube world, there's so much discussion about things like natural potential, how big you can get naturally. A lot of speculation about how natural should train. Me and you, it's fair to say, are old schoolers.
Yep.
I'll be 57 in a week. You are 51. And I think we've seen every season possible in lifting.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't mind, I'd like to start with some discussion on training because it's a very heated topic. You see a lot of internet debates on frequency training and body part splits. One of the things I've spent a lot of time in the industry as an editor and a writer, and I've seen all the seasons, body part split seasons and frequency training. Before we dive into that, can you take us back down the road a little bit? What's your experience? What kind of programming gave you the best results when you were really in that early stage of building, and what type of frequency or programming have you used over the years?
I kind of laugh because I still somewhat train the same way, just a little more educated and experienced now. Um, but over the years, especially, early on, without the internet and all that stuff, it was just the magazines that would come once a month. You read what you read from Muscle and Fitness or Flex magazine, and you know, you read what the guys in those magazines were doing, and you applied like the Weeder principles and things like that. Um, my own training evolved, especially during the time period of we'll say Dorian Yates. Um, that blood and guts, all out lifting mentality. Um, and that's part of still true today. Now I've gotten smarter as I've gotten older because I want to do this for a long time. So there is some experience there of how hard to push it, but a lot of times, the training and stuff is you know as he used to say, you could tap a stick of dynamite with a pencil all day, or you can hit it with a sledgehammer. Most of the time, I prefer to go in with a sledgehammer. Hit some good hard sets, take them to failure or close to it, and get out of there. Our workouts are an hour, maybe an hour and a half with warm up and mobility stuff, things like that now. But for the most part, it's go in, hit it hard, and get out. Um, and then the rest of that goes with nutrition and recovery and mobility stuff, like I mentioned. So that's pretty much how training goes. If I train 3 to 4 days a week in the gym, as far as heavy workouts go, like I said, for about an hour, hour and a half, there's no marathon, 40 set days or anything like that. It's get in, hit it hard, and get out. And it's still true even now.
Now, what type of split are you using currently? What type of programming?
We'll do body part splits where and they'll change. I'll change programs every, I don't know, 8, 12 weeks, depending on how I'm feeling. Sometimes I'll throw a week off in between, and it might be a typical back and by, chest and shoulder, tricep, leg work or leg day, kind of 3 day split. Might split that up into four, where maybe shoulders and arms are a day, back and chest might get their own. Might do a program or training system where it's back and hamstring day to kind of split that up and go posterior chain work, um, and then hit a chest day or chest and shoulders, or, you know, so it varies as far as that goes, but it's typically body part splits, one or two body parts at a time, 3 or 4 exercises tops per body part, sometimes only one or two, and 3, 4, maybe 5 sets on a volume type program.
Now, is it fair to say for most of your career you've been doing body part type training?
Yep.
So the only reason I ask is because I think it's fair to say I'm one of the few guys in in the YouTube world that tell folks that body part splits are okay to use, because I don't know if you notice, I don't know how much you pay attention, but a lot of the science guys try to push the concept that frequency training is a holy grail. There's even beliefs
Yeah.
that frequency training is so much better than body part training that there's like somehow this wide gulf of differences. One of the concepts I push, or I don't want to use push, but one of the concepts I try to educate the younger lifter on is that it doesn't really matter as long as you're training hard, because it's a long journey.
Hmm.
What are your thoughts? I mean, do you follow this whole frequency versus body part discussion? Do you have any general thoughts on it?
Yeah, I've seen it, and you know, both have their benefits, I guess. Again, depending on your goals and things, but yeah, I do still focus on body parts over frequency, over sets per week, and that type of stuff. Um, but yeah, I guess like, as you said, still old school, and while I follow some of that, I haven't gotten too deep into it, and I kind of stick with what's works for me and what still works.
Yeah, that's kind of the important thing. I mean, when I started with Muscle and Strength, and I believe you've written a
Mhm.
couple articles on Muscle and Strength.
Yep.
I started with them, I believe, way back in 2008. And when I came on board, I wrote an article about frequency training, like a full body routine
Hmm.
that was kind of in line with, what Reg Park would do or what Steve Reeves would do. And I was actually, there was an incredible backlash against me even bringing up the possibility that frequency might work for natural lifters, that they were asking for me to be fired. And in the modern world, if you even talk about a body part split, it's kind of the opposite. They think you're a lunatic. And I like to really focus on this topic because both you and I come from a world where I've done pretty much nothing but body part splits. I've played around with everything else. I like them. I don't like, doing everything in the kitchen sink in a workout. What
Hmm.
do you feel on your end are the pros or the positives of doing, body part splits? What do you like about doing them?
Well, I like that they're focused for one. I mean, you said I can concentrate on one or two body parts in a workout. I can tailor the exercises, the weight, the reps, the intensity, and just hit it hard. And it's not, well, I don't want to go too heavy here because I got to have energy later for this, or, take something like back and then legs, and, you got to give up something at some point if you're going to try and get through like a full body workout every time, or you're doing, you know, 12 sets per, each body part as you go through, or whatever the case may be. So, for me, it's easy to focus on, okay, today I'm hitting back, and I'm going to hit four exercises at 3 or 4 sets each. Here's the rep range I want. The weight is relative depending on the goal and the reps I want out of it and what I'm trying to gain out of it. And then you just go in there and do it. I mean, and that's it. There's no, I got to save energy, or I'm going to go lighter here so I can do more there. Um, and it's less to focus on. Even like as contest time comes, and sometimes my workouts get longer and things like that, we add in more body parts or supersets. Um, and I notice you know, it's harder to concentrate on multiple areas at once for me. So I'd much rather go in, like I said, hit it with a sledgehammer and get out of there. And that's really the focus, and then I can focus too on recovery and mobility, and I can add things in on other days or other workouts to help supplement the smaller muscle groups, or some mobility work on an off day or recovery day. And I can be more specific about what I'm doing in there. I'm more training with purpose rather than just training for volume.
Now, I have a couple more training questions for you, and I'm going to toss more of a general question. Um, if you take a group of young men and you take them to the gym, and some of them are doing full body workouts, and some of them are doing upper lowers, and some of them are doing body part splits. And this might sound like a leading question, but I want your honest opinion. Over the course of 10 years, do you feel it really matters which style a lifter trains as long as they're training hard?
Yeah, I'm gonna say no in general, but it also depends on the individual goals. If that person is a long distance runner, um, they may benefit from one training style over the other, given a duration of time. However, the bottom line is you still have to go in and work hard. I don't think that you know that part of the equation can be dismissed in any training style. So overall, yeah, I think you're going to gain muscle, you're going to gain strength, you're going to gain size, but you have to be able to put in the work. Persistently consistent is what I tell people. If you're going to, oh, it's a frequency day, I'm just going to run through and count to 12 each time I do a set. It means nothing. But if you're going to go all out each time, then yeah, you're going to benefit regardless of the training style, I guess you would say.
So you won your pro card in 2000, your first pro card in 2011. Is that correct?
Yes.
So it's fair to say you've been around or are friends with, are pretty familiar with a lot of the other competitors. I mean,
Hmm.
um, and from what you've seen, how do you see, how are they training? Because if you look on the internet and you follow YouTube, everybody again is, pushing this ideal of frequency training. Do you see a lot of the top pros using body part splits, or are
I
you not
see,
sure?
yeah. I want to say I see more body part splits than anything. Some may have more volume to their workouts. Some may do more upper lower, or, more of like the powerlifting push pull days type stuff. Um, but overall, I would still say it's fairly predominant to come down to body part splits.
Now, let's talk a little bit about exercise selection. There's some belief that you need to change exercises frequently or confuse the muscles and a lot of different crazy things. But
Right.
both of us have been training for at least 35 years. You started when
Hmm.
you're 14.
Yep.
um, is your exercise selection dramatically different than where you were 30 years ago, or is it basically the same meat and potatoes?
Yeah, it's funny. It's pretty much the basic meat and potatoes. I mean, I like my deadlifts, my barbell rows. I liked my squats. You know, Benching varies. Like I've mentioned, I'm not much of a flat bench person. It just doesn't feel. I don't feel it as much as a decline. I love decline bench press. Um, Dumbbells, the hammer strength equipment. There's some of it out there that's got great movement on it where I can really squeeze and contract the muscle. Um, but then all the other exercises are just variations of that. Pull downs, pull ups, pulley rows. Um, for back, you know, I might change the handle. I might change my arm angle, depending on different things. Going from dumbbells to barbells to different machines. But at the end of the day, it's still those basic core exercises. It's just a matter of varying, like I said, angle position or hand position, just to hit the muscle differently. But when it comes to basic mass movements, it's the same basic exercises I've done since day one.
Now, I want to ask you a couple questions just for reference. What is your height and what weight do you generally compete at?
5'8", and I compete around 170.
So, that might that's kind of the range that I tell people. I haven't been around too many natural shows. I've been at least to 5 or 6, but I tell folks that a lot of the naturals, the top naturals, tend to compete in the 170s or 180s. If they're really tall.
Hmm.
Do you remember your weight when you won your first pro card?
I was probably a little lighter than that, but I also was nowhere as dense or shredded as I am now.
So do you find over the years that you picked up some density, even though your overall weight or size hasn't, been dramatically different?
Yeah, definitely. I'll tell you, this season, it's the first time I've competed in 3.5 years. So since 2020 was the last time I was on stage, that November, and then I just started this season of competing was August, and I am noticeably in the best shape I've ever been in, as far as density, as far as being striated, thin skinned. I mean, I'm up there. I'm as conditioned as I've ever been, and as solid as I've ever been. And that was just, you know, kind of the idea of no off season. I just train year round, and nutrition is calculated year round, and it just comes together.
Have you dove into much of the whole concept of natural potential or natural limits that's tossed around on the internet?
Yeah, and I've had this thought before, or ever since I was young. Um, you know, I don't know, and nobody really knows how far you can push your own limit. I know there is genetically a limit to how much size I'm going to gain. How much muscle I can really pack on. What the shape of my muscle bellies and things are. However, there's no finish line to that. There's no bell that goes off, or there's no measurement that says, "Yep, you've hit it. Now you can stop." So I don't intend to stop. I continue to train hard, eat well, push things as hard as I can in the gym, and whatever improvements I can continue to make, I'm going to continue to fight for.
Now you've been training close to 37 years. You said you started when you were 14, so about
Yep.
37. Any major injuries, or how you feeling? How you
No,
feeling right now?
thankfully, I've never had any serious injuries in the gym. Tweaks here and there. My knees ached for a bit. I did more. It was more of a learning to become more mobile. Um, Recovery days, more mobility exercises, things like that, and just more self care. But no, thankfully, in all the time I've been doing this, I haven't, had any major ligament damage or torn anything or that kind of stuff so far. Um, I've been fortunate.
So I started around 1986. I'm not sure the year you started lifting, and we kind of
Hmm.
come from that same world where I would pick up a muscle and fitness or a flex. Ironman was harder for me to find. I was out in New Mexico, and it just wasn't on the newsstand. Um, I'm sure you were like me. You would digest, read everything two or three times, get all
Yep.
your information for good or for bad. Um, back then when you were training, I tell people that I got lucky. I just, um, the magazines taught kind of an obsessive lifestyle, get a lot of sleep, eat every 2.5 to 3 hours or whatever it was.
Hmm.
And I went all in and just kind of, some people would consider that to be almost sheep like, but I just went all in, and the results were just amazing because I
Sure.
just trusted the simple basics, and I never knew anything. I don't think progressive overload was talked about as much back then, as much as hard training. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, I remember some of that, like in the magazines and like the Weeder principles. But yeah, it was hard training, um, and like you said, it was it was going all in. It's funny because it took me a long time. I competed early on. I like you. It was probably the 86 or 85, 86 when I started. Bodybuilding was kind of its own subversive culture. It wasn't mainstream. It wasn't, all over the place like it is now. You didn't walk past the gym and suddenly you're taking on clients because you lifted a weight. It was kind of this underground community of people, and you kind of stood out when you went to the store and bought Muscle and Fitness because people looked at you like you were nuts. Um, so it took me a long time to accept that this is okay and it's kind of mainstream now, I still have always kind of kept to myself and just do my thing regardless of whatever else is going on around me. It's just, you know, I don't know, it's kind of that underground mentality. But yeah, it was always about, you go in, you work hard, and you go home. And then, you eat big, eat big, train big, and sleep. So yeah, I'm right there with you.
So, did you think about back in the day, like, the first time I benched, I remember I put 95 on, and that seemed like lightweight, right? And I
Hmm.
was 18 years old, and I failed on like rep 3 or 4, and I was miserably embarrassed because I was stapled on my first set. And I went back and I wanted to do one more over that time and then one more over that time. And I just kind of picked up that mentality from that first set. Did you have any specific approach back then? Were you trying to improve? Were you logging your workouts? Did you think about numbers, or did you just kind of train and let the progress come to you?
Yeah, no, I logged my workouts. I mean, like I said, my dad bought me my first weight bench with, the weight set and the plastic gray weights. Um, and it came with a book and it came with a sample workout in there. And so I would make, charts on loose leaf of, list of exercises, the date at the top, and then I would put in how many sets and reps and, what the weight was that I did. And then, over time, the goal was always to do more than I was doing. If I could, increase 5 pounds on something, that was a good indication I was on the right track. If I could add more reps to something, that was progress. So that was that progressive overload over time. But yeah, that's how it started. I would, log, and I would, just like you would fail, and you know over the, especially the early course of training, I learned, failure isn't failure. Failure was a good thing. Um, to hit that point. So, and it was just a setup for the next forward step, really. So it was never an end.
I often tell people it's hard to explain the era we grew up in because hard training was kind of, you said it was more, it was definitely more niche, right? We
Hmm.
definitely, it wasn't mainstream like it is now. You didn't go to the gym and have 20 people at the dumbbell rack doing curls. We were kind of the oddballs, but I tell people it's hard to explain. But back then, we kind of knew what hard training was because all of our idols were training hard.
Hmm.
Arnold was training hard, and Tom Platz was training hard. And even if you didn't believe in Mensa or you thought he was crazy or whatever because he was different, you knew he was training hard.
Hmm.
Did you have any? I mean, do you kind of feel the same way? Like back then, we were immersed in hard training, so no one really needed to teach us that.
I think so. I mean, I remember, like I said, my dad had bought me my first weight set, so I trained at home for the first couple years, and I would train in like my high school gym, where the other people in the gym were maybe the football team kind of thing. So I would see them training, but it wasn't bodybuilders. Um, so when I went to my first commercial gym, you saw those bigger guys who just, went in and were training hard. And so, as a 140-pound high school kid, that's who I wanted to be like, and that's who I would watch, but I would definitely stay out of their way. Um, I certainly wouldn't interrupt their set or anything. But yeah, those were the guys who were in there training hard and doing the work that kind of created that model of that's how it's supposed to be.
No, with the onset of the internet era, I think somewhere between 2005 and 2000, maybe 2012 or 13, powerlifting kind of invaded the information space, and we started to see more minimal programs. I'm not sure if you really paid much of attention, but you saw programs like Strong Lifts and Starting Strength and Wendler's 5 through 1. People started to do more strength based programs.
Hmm.
trying to build muscle, using the strength based programs, which were more minimal. It almost got to the point where we were chasing strength rather than trying to maximize sets. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. Strength training is definitely uh, moved, I guess, to the forefront, or become more mainstream conscious. Uh,
What is
Even
it?
in my own training, I even even now watching the powerlifting guys train at the gym, I've incorporated over the years some of that powerlifting principle or mentality, um, rather than a straight hypertrophy bodybuilding style.
What does it mean to you to maximize a set? What you talked about, heading to the gym and with that focus. What's your focus? I mean, are you trying to get everything out of every set? How do you maximize your sets? How do you keep that focus?
Yeah, you know, it it really hasn't changed. I want to go in. I want to lift as hard as I can. So there's an intensity factor there. There's a focus factor. The weight, like I said, is relative. I can struggle with 20 pounds. I could struggle with 200 pounds. It depends on what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. Again, there's a purpose to it. It's not just to go in and film it, or just to go in and lift something or to say I did it. Um, but for the most part, the bulk of my training is lift as much as I can for as long as I can, as hard as I can, in order to grow, in order to push that limit and push that comfort zone, so that I you know do end up building muscle and getting stronger and gaining some size.
I want to switch gears and talk about nutrition. I was lucky during the years I first started lifting in that at college, the cafeteria was basically a buffet, and
Yes.
could eat all I wanted to, which was kind of like a lot different than growing up in the 80s when your mom said, eat this and you were done. Um, so I was an accidental bulker, right? I went
Mhm.
from 152, 154 to like 186 in my first 3 years of lifting. And I think that food intake dramatically impacted my results. What are you? Were you a bulker back then? An indirect bulker? Did you just slowly gain weight over time?
Oh
Um,
no,
what was
definitely
your
like you. It was absolute bulking. I mean, I think at my heaviest at one point when I wasn't competing, but it was just lifting to get as big as possible. Um, I was, I think, around 230. And like I said, now I compete at 170. Off season, I'm in the 190s, low 190s. Um, so yeah, I was, eating for eating for size and strength, and it was definitely deliberate bulking. It
how do
wasn't an
you
aesthetic thing.
how do you approach your off seasons now? Are you more loose? Is it more structured?
No, it's structured year round. I work, and by choice, and by, again, goals. Um, I work with a coach named Craig Yarnell, um, and I've worked with him for 10 years now. And he will we will set my macros. How I fill those macros is up to me, but it's a lifestyle. So even in an off season, even in the 3 or 4 years in between contest seasons here, I've had numbers to hit, and the portion size is increased. The foods may vary. Things can be a little looser here and there, but for the most part, it's the same. You know, Whole food, good nutrition, or good meats, good vegetables, good fruits, plenty of everything, and it just stays that way. It's not really now I'm bulking, I need to eat more of this, or oh, now I'm cutting, I can't eat this. Um, I'm never starving, and I'm never gorging myself just to eat.
What do you, I'm sure at the gym sometimes you see these guys that train pretty hard, but they don't take their nutrition seriously. As a coach,
Mhm.
I see a certain percentage of guys that really love the iron, but when it comes to nutrition, they're varying degrees of unfocused.
Right.
Not necessarily radically so, but you just wished for them that they would be a little bit more fine tuned. What do you have to say to like the younger lifter that understands hard training, but this still hasn't connected with the importance of nutrition?
Yeah, I see that quite a bit. And I do try and change the mentality that it's not you can only eat, broccoli and Brussels sprouts and you can't have pizza. It's more of a holistic approach where, eating pizza has macros in it. There's carbs in there, there's fats in there, there's protein in there. You may not want to eat the whole pizza and you may not want to eat a whole pizza every day, but you can work that stuff in so that it's sustainable because that's really what, the training is fine. You're there for an hour or whatever, hour and a half, a couple days a week or however many days you go. But the other 20 something hours in the day is where you're going to gain, the nutrients you need to support that style of lifting if you want to make any sort of strength gains or muscle size gains. So it's more of approaching it and talking with people about, it's got to be sustainable and it's got to be something you can do, from a holistic approach. You can have your ice cream, you can have your chocolate, you can, um, but you have to learn the science behind it. You have to know what your macros are. You have to know, how your body's absorbing certain nutrients. You want to make sure you're getting a wide variety of vitamins, minerals, um, to complete the picture and to support what you're doing in the gym. Otherwise, you're leaving a lot on the table by not paying attention to that.
How many times? How many times have you competed? Do you recall?
Uh, no.
How does it? You,
Well, this season alone will be four. Um, yeah, four just this season. So, 4 or 5 shows at a time when I do compete. I try and bunch them all within a few months, so that I am close to contest shape and form. And then, every couple of years, if I don't want to compete, I'll take a year or two, or in this case, almost, 3.5 years off from competing.
have you ever run into a natural bodybuilder by the name of Sean Sullivan?
Yeah,
I
Sully.
think I interviewed him way back in the Muscle and Strength days, and I think he competed like 90 times or something ridiculous. That's why I was curious how many times you feel you've competed.
Yeah, I don't know if I've hit that number yet over all these years, but um, yeah, I mean, some guys can do it. I mean, I've seen some guys who start their competitive season in, February and will go, you know almost what seems to be, 2 or 3 times a month up until November, December, and you know that's a long stretch to maintain that sort of conditioning and dieting and mentality too. I mean, so I try and bunch a handful within a few months, and that's it. So
So there is a lot of, I guess, with the the onset of YouTube fitness and social media fitness, there's a lot of what you would call voices running around creating fear, for views. Like one of the things I talk about is you see a lot of fear that the body is very fragile. If you don't get the perfect sleep, you can't build muscle. If you do a cutting diet, you're going to lose all your muscle, right? All these
mhm.
fears develop kind of from, social media fitness and YouTube fitness. For somebody like you or Sean Sullivan that's competed endless amount of times, you can pretty much vouch that it's very difficult to lose muscle even when you're cutting for a show. I can't imagine you lose much, if any at all.
Yeah, I mean, I don't measure it as far as, calipers or any sort of scientific equipment. Um, just because I don't have access to it and I don't go searching for it. But like I said, off season when I'm training and eating more or eating differently, um, I'm maybe, 20 pounds over what I compete at. And then it comes back down. And then once competing's over, I'll work it back up there. So it's fairly consistent. And I don't think I'm losing a ton of muscle when I'm getting ready for shows and things.
Now, when you how long do you typically diet for a show when you're going to compete? Let's say you're headed in your first show in a while.
It's it's usually about 20 weeks, 24, but it's very gradual. Like I know, outside of the natural world, a lot of times there's this mentality of, oh, 12 weeks takes me 12 weeks to drop, 40 pounds and I'm in stage shape. And um, I don't do it that way. And working with Craig and stuff, we've never done it that way. It's a very gradual process. And most of the time, like even this year, for example, I probably started back in February for an August show. And I never really thought, like, okay, today's day one of cutting season. It was just, we're adjusting my macros week to week. Um, I know if I'm gaining weight or losing weight too quickly or too slowly. Um, and I never really know, like on a scale, when I weigh in, once a week or whatever, if I drop a quarter pound, a half a pound, that's about it, at a time. So it's not like I'm dropping, 2 or 3 pounds a week in order to be ready in a certain time period. So when it's very gradual like that, I think the gains and things I've made stay longer and stay more consistent. And my body doesn't go through a lot of that turmoil and stuff. So I don't really feel awful or feel different or feel, starved or anything like that.
Well, that's kind of an interesting, topic to discuss because you see a lot of talk on social media about being super lean and how it really negatively impacts you in a
Yep.
number of different ways. Anything from
Hmm.
sexual performance to energy, just to literally going insane. Do you experience much of any of that, or do you like you just said, you feel rather normal?
Yeah, I feel rather consistent. I mean, particularly this prep season alone. Like I said, I am, know, the most conditioned I've ever been, and even some of the feedback from the Yorton, I'm up there with what I consider, the best of the best up there, and some of the feedback I received was I was the most conditioned guy out there, which is very humbling for one. Um, but yeah, I don't feel bad. I don't feel, starved. I mean, I have maybe grumpy days or whatever, but I'm not hangry. I'm not running around, beating on people's car windows or anything like that because, I haven't had a Snickers bar. Um, so it's pretty consistent. It's just like I said, it's more of a lifestyle than it is, the competing. I take it to my own extreme for my own personal passion, but I don't seem to have those extremes or feel those extremes at the moment.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about steroids because they're such a big part of bodybuilding. I remember, I don't know if you remember way back when in the magazines, there used to be ads in like the back of the
Oh yeah,
magazines,
yep.
mail order steroids. I tell a story. Um, I was a year in and I was a broke, a broke kid. I think I sent $100 in cash off to Canada. I didn't even have a clue what a steroid was back then. And magic or shockingly, I didn't receive anything back. When you mail cash, but I think that was the last time I thought about steroids. I'd just never seen
Yeah.
them in the gym really. I think I started to see. I was around a couple people when I was about 47, 48. The first time I actually saw them in a gym bag in a gym. Were you ever around the temptation, or was it just like something you saw but never really got close to?
Yeah, it was something, it's funny when, back when we started training, I wouldn't have known the guys in the magazines were on stuff or not on stuff. It wasn't something I was aware of. I just knew like, hey, I want to be, being 5'8", I want to be 5'8" and compete at 225, completely shredded, Um, it wasn't until I had a few years experience that, and my first show was when I was, I think, 19. Um, I did a teen division show, and the only shows I knew of were NPC shows. So I quickly learned the difference of natural and not natural that day. And it was the only, non-tested show I ever did. Um, but I wasn't around it. I became aware of it over the years. And I specifically remember, I think I was a freshman in college. Um, and somebody on the floor, had talked up that they were going to start taking steroids or whatever. And I remember thinking to myself then, the day I contemplate using them will be the day I stop lifting for good. And that's been it. That was the only real, conscious thought I had about the topic. And I've never gone there. Like I said, I enjoy the training and the lifestyle in itself. And at this point in my life, I want to live, you know, long enough to hold my grandkids and, maybe great grandkids. And, rather than, hey, I want a trophy at 35 and I'm dead at 37.
Do you follow the pro side, the IFBB side much, or is that something you don't care for?
Yeah, not much. I mean, there was a time that I did because that's what was around. Um, but not too much. I mean, I'm aware of things going on there, or like I knew, they just had their Olympia or whatever. But I don't follow it the way I used to. I've gone out to the Arnold, a bunch of times for when I was writing for magazines or interviewing people, things like that. Um, but yeah, I'm not that invested in it as far as whatever following it or being a fan or chasing that kind of stuff.
Do you feel like the modern era is more cartoonish and therefore we feel more detached, or do you feel it was more a case we didn't know better when we were younger, so we just followed our idols?
Probably a little bit of both. I mean, definitely, having met some of those idols from when we were younger over the years, you know, you definitely see the difference between where we're at or where I'm at versus where they are or were. Um, and I mean, there has been a period of pro bodybuilding, the IFBB side where they have become, as you said, cartoonish in size and mass and things. I mean, they're massive. I mean, it's something to see for sure, but there's a definite disconnect between at least my world and that world.
I think, when I look back, like Arnold and all those guys, I mean, sure, they use things, but, these days, having been around people and been in the industry and hearing some of the elaborate things that they do to their bodies, I don't think the average person has any clue how in depth and complicated it can get. And for me, that's such a crazy turnoff. Like, I couldn't even imagine the degrees and the monetary investment in something like that. Uh,
No.
Have you ever run into these crowds that accuse you of using steroids just because you look, reasonably in
Oh,
shape?
yeah. I mean, I'll get people who'll think that, or come out and say it. But it's somewhat complimentary in a way to think, you think I'm, actually on something. Um, but at the same time, it just means you don't really know who I am or what I'm about. So your opinion really doesn't matter to me.
I want to ask you about arm size. Have you measured your arms? Do you measure your arms? You know your arm size?
No,
No.
no, 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 not in a long time. I don't know. I don't know what they're.
17, 17 and a half, 17 and a quarter, 16.
Gonna say they're probably 17, 18 inch arm.
Yeah, it's basically in the range that I try to educate the younger guys on, what's realistic. I have
They're
naturally,
not 24-inch pythons, that's for sure.
I have really genetically obscene triceps. So sometimes people think my arms are 20 inches, and I tell them at 18% body fat, I'm barely 17. I'm holding on by a thread. I don't think a lot of people believe that. So that's kind of why I was asking you. Uh,
No, now I'm curious.
who was your big idol growing up? Did you have a specific idol growing up?
um, yeah, probably Rich Gaspari, Lee Labrada, um, Lee Haney, and then Dorian uh, in the early days of that stuff. So more, Labrada and Gaspari were closer to my height, and their conditioning was phenomenal.
So a couple things before we go. I don't want to keep you on forever, but this we grew up in an era where there were so many supplement claims, and the magazines were just fueled by supplements. And I'm sure you've tried a little bit of this and that over the years. I mean, I remember Tribulus being the magic thing back in the day, and all kinds of supplements. Do you take any supplements right now? I mean, even like vitamin D or B12, or what does your daily regimen look like?
Um, I take a few. A multivitamin. Um, I will use creatine. I've used vitamin D on and off. I try and just get outside and get some sunlight during the day. I'm in upstate New York or Western New York, so there's a good number of months where it's just gray and dark all the time. So I'll add vitamin D then. Um, I'll try and do most of it through food. So beta alanine and creatine together. And then with a pre workout and protein powder, that's about it.
Now, one final question in competing in the Yorton. Is there anybody you've run into competitor wise where you just look at him and you're like, that's a great physique?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of guys in natural bodybuilding that are just phenomenal looking. I mean, uh, and it's funny. There's guys that are much older than me that have incredible physiques at at this point in time. And then there's a bunch of younger guys too that are just you see them on stage and you're just blown away. So
Who's the most interesting person you've run into? You said you've run into some people. Have you run into any of your old idols or any of the old bodybuilders from back then?
oh yeah, I've met a bunch. I've met Gaspari and Labrada. I've met Dorian a few times. Um, through the Arnolds over the last well a few years back, but meeting guys like Brian Shaw or the Mountain there, um, the big strong man.
Right.
That that's just you know I mean, look at my size, look at their size. They're a foot or more taller than me to start, and then they got 200 or 300 pounds on me. So that's kind of fun, funny for me to meet those guys.
Have you ever had a chance to? You remember Clarence Bass at all?
Yeah. Yep.
A lot of people don't remember Clarence, and I remember. It's hard not to remember him from our era because Clarence basically coined the term "ripped." His
Hmm.
books were ripped, and I got to interview him back when in my muscle and strength days. I believe he was in his 70s back then. I think he's still going mid to late 80s, but a real testament to the longevity of the sport. And he was one of the first guys that was ultra ripped. And
Hmm.
you mentioned, being on stage and being one of the best conditioned. Do you have any secrets? Any secrets you could pass along to how you get in amazing shape?
No, it's really just consistent effort. Like I said, persistently consistent. I just keep doing the work each day, that I know it needs to be done, whether I feel like it or want to or whatever. I just do it. And so I think that consistency eventually, if I can be consistent every day, eventually it's going to yield the results. But yeah,
So,
and speaking of those, idols, Franco Colombo, I got to meet him a few times out at the Arnold and chatted with him a number of times, and he was pretty cool.
so, Frank, I appreciate you joining me. It's been nearly an hour. I don't want to keep you on much longer, but where can people connect with you on social media, YouTube, or wherever you're available?
Basically, everything is Frank Gigante Natural Pro on Instagram. There's a YouTube channel, Facebook. I also have the book. It's called Everyday Warrior. That's on Amazon. And if you connect with me on any of the social media accounts, you can always just message me, and I'm happy to chat.
I'll drop a link to your book down below. And I'm glad you brought it
Gotcha.
up because I almost forgot to mention it. Can you give everyone a real quick overview of what your book is about?
Yeah, the book is called Everyday Warrior. It's meant to be an action guide. It's meant to be written in. It's not a novel. It's not a feel good story. It's we all have goals in different areas of life. It doesn't have to be fitness related. Um, but sometimes getting started or staying consistent or keeping yourself accountable is hard. So over time with my own social media stuff and groups I've worked with and people I've dealt with, um, this book is kind of the culmination of a certain mindset or growth mindset of how to put your intentions and goals into concrete form, how to take specific actions each day, each week, how to stay accountable for those, and then chart your progress and build upon those so you take your intentions and turn them into accomplishments.
All right, Frank, I'm going to let you go. I appreciate you joining me again. I'm going to drop a link down below to Frank's book and his social medias. And appreciate it, Frank. I'll
Steve,
talk.
thank you very much. I am very much honored. So I thank you.
It's always good to talk bodybuilding, and especially with somebody that's not 30 years younger than me.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. I appreciate getting the chance to be on here with you.
All right, man. You have a good rest of your evening.
All right, you too. Thank you.
Bye now.